October 19th, 202 BCE near Zama, North Africa. Picture this. You're standing on an open plain outside Carthage itself. Behind the enemy line, the city that started this war 31 years ago. In front of you, a man who has not lost a single major battle in 17 years. His name is Hannibal Barca. He crossed the Alps with elephants when everyone said it was impossible. He destroyed 3 Roman armies in 3 years. At Cannae, he trapped and annihilated the largest force Rome had ever raised, using a formation so perfect it is still taught in military academies today. For 14 years after that, he marched through Italy undefeated. Rome never once beat him in open battle. Not once. Now he's home. Recalled from Italy for the first time in his life because Rome finally did something nobody expected. They stopped trying to fight Hannibal and invaded Carthage instead. Facing him, Publius Cornelius Scipio, 34 years old, a Roman general who has also never lost a major battle, and who studied Hannibal's tactics for over a decade, waiting for exactly this moment. By every rule of ancient warfare, the greatest tactical mind the world has ever produced should not be able to lose this battle. Now watch what happens. By the end of the day, Hannibal will lose. Not to superior numbers. Carthage actually has more men on the field. Not to bad luck. He will lose because the trap that made him legendary at Cannae is about to be built again, on this exact field, and used against him by a man who learned it by watching Hannibal use it first. How does the man who invented the perfect ambush walk directly into his own? By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how. To understand why Hannibal is standing on African soil for the first time in his life, you need to understand what Rome did after Cannae. It refused to die. For 14 years, Rome rebuilt, absorbed loss after loss, and refused to fight Hannibal directly in Italy ever again. Instead, a young Roman officer who had survived Cannae as a teenager, watching an entire army destroyed around him, spent the next decade in Spain, tearing apart Carthage's other armies one by one. His name was Scipio, and by 204 BCE, he had a plan the Senate initially thought was insane. Don't fight Hannibal in Italy, Scipio tells the Senate. Invade Carthage, force them to recall him. Nobody has ever taken a war to African soil. A senator objects. If you fail, Rome has no army left to stop him. If we keep waiting for Hannibal to make a mistake in Italy, we'll be waiting forever. He hasn't made one in 17 years. Scipio gets his invasion force. He lands in North Africa in 204 BCE, and within 2 years, he has done exactly what he promised. Defeated Carthage's allied armies, turned the Numidian king Massinissa against his own former ally, and pushed close enough to Carthage itself that the city has no choice. They recall Hannibal. For the first time since he was a boy, Hannibal returns to Africa. And for the first time in his career, he is not choosing the battlefield. He is defending home ground that isn't really his. He has spent his entire adult life in Italy and Spain, not here. The two generals meet once before the battle. A face-to-face conference arranged under truce, each with an interpreter at his side. You could have stayed in Italy, Scipio says. Rome never beat you there. And you could have stayed in Spain, Hannibal answers. Rome never asked you to gamble an entire war on one battle. I didn't come here to negotiate. Neither did I. I came because Carthage asked me to. Hannibal studies him for a long moment. You've studied me. I can see it in how you deployed. I had a good teacher, Scipio says. I was at Cannae. Something changes in Hannibal's expression. He doesn't answer. The truce ends without agreement. Both armies prepare for the next morning. Hannibal has roughly 40,000 to 50,000 men, more than Scipio's 35,000. But numbers were never the thing that made Hannibal dangerous. What made him dangerous was always the plan behind the numbers, and this time, the plan is compromised before it starts. He deploys in 3 separate lines instead of his usual single coordinated force. The front line, mercenaries and mixed levies, expendable, meant to absorb the first shock. The second line, Carthaginian and African citizen infantry, less experienced. The third line, held well back. His veteran soldiers who marched with him through Italy for over a decade, men who have never lost. In front of all 3 lines, 80 war elephants, the largest number Hannibal has ever fielded in a single battle. Why 3 lines instead of 1? An officer asks, studying the formation. You've never fought this way. Because I don't trust the first 2 to hold, Hannibal answers. Let them bleed him. My veterans finish it. It is, in its own way, still brilliant. But it is also something Hannibal has never needed before, a battle plan built around not trusting his own army. Scipio studies the elephants from across the field and makes an adjustment nobody in Hannibal's camp expects. Instead of a solid infantry line, he arranges his maniples and columns with open lanes running straight through the formation, gaps wide enough for a charging elephant to run through without hitting a single soldier. "You're opening holes in your own line," a Roman officer says. "That's insane against infantry." "It's not for infantry," Scipio answers. "It's for elephants. Give them somewhere to run and they'll take it instead of trampling my men." He positions his cavalry on both wings. Roman cavalry under Laelius on one side, Masiniss's Numidian riders, once loyal to Carthage, now fighting for Rome, on the other. At dawn, the horns sound, and Hannibal opens with his elephants. 80 of them charge the Roman line at once, tusks and screaming, trumpeting filling the field. It should break any infantry formation on earth. "Sound the horns, all of them," a Roman officer shouts. Every Roman horn and trumpet blasts at once, deliberately, as loud and chaotic as possible. Some of the elephants panic immediately, veering sideways into Hannibal's own cavalry instead of the Roman line. Others charge straight ahead, directly into the open lanes Scipio built for exactly this. They run harmlessly through the Roman formation and out the other side, causing chaos behind the lines instead of in front of them. "The elephants are running into our own men," a Carthaginian officer shouts. Hannibal's greatest weapon has just been turned into a liability before the infantry lines have even met. On the cavalry wings, Laelius and Masinissa charge immediately, exploiting the confusion. Hannibal's cavalry, already unsettled by the stampeding elephants, breaks and flees the field almost at once. And here's where the echo of Cannae becomes unmistakable, if you know what to watch for. At Cannae, Hasdrubal's cavalry destroyed Rome's horsemen, and then, instead of chasing them off the field for the kill, turned back to hit the Roman infantry in the rear. That single decision won the battle. At Zama, Laelius and Masinissa do exactly the same thing Hasdrubal did, except this time they're the ones with the cavalry advantage, and this time it's Hannibal's army waiting to find out what that decision costs. But not yet. First, they chase the fleeing Carthaginian cavalry off the field entirely, out of sight, out of the battle. It will matter enormously in about an hour. Right now, it looks like an overcommitted pursuit with the infantry battle still undecided. Because on the ground, the infantry are locked in exactly the brutal, grinding fight Hannibal built his three-line formation to survive. The front mercenary line crashes into Scipio's maniples and, after fierce fighting, begins to break. They fall back toward the second line for support, except the second line doesn't open ranks to let them through. Why aren't they moving aside? A mercenary captain shouts, trying to retreat through the Carthaginian second line. "Open the line!" They don't. Whether out of fear, confusion, or orders never properly relayed, the second line holds its position. And the retreating first line, with nowhere to go, turns and fights its own countrymen in the chaos. Hannibal's own formation is tearing itself apart before the Romans have to do anything more. Scipio's maniples grind through the wreckage of the first two Carthaginian lines. What should have been a controlled, staged defense has become a disorganized mess. Then finally, the two armies' best troops meet. Scipio's veterans, hardened by over a decade of war in Spain and Africa, collide with Hannibal's Italian veterans, the men who never lost in 14 years on Roman soil. This is the fight that should have decided Zama on skill alone, and for a long, brutal stretch it does look even. Neither side's best troops break. Shields lock. Neither line gives ground. "They're holding," a Roman officer says, watching the center. "Nobody's breaking." "Then we need the flanks," Scipio answers, glancing toward the horizon where his cavalry disappeared an hour earlier. "Where are they?" The battlefield holds its breath. Two armies' finest soldiers, locked in a fight neither can win outright, waiting to see which side gets reinforced first. Then dust rises on the horizon. Laelius and Masinissa are riding back. Having chased Hannibal's broken cavalry completely off the field, they turn around and drive straight into the rear of Hannibal's veteran line. The same maneuver, the same geometry, the same devastating logic that won Cannae for Hannibal 17 years earlier. Except this time, it isn't his cavalry closing the trap, it's Rome's. "Cavalry, behind us!" a veteran officer shouts, and for the first time in 14 years, there is real panic in a formation that has never once broken under pressure. Front, both flanks now collapsing. Rear, Hannibal's finest troops, the men who survived the Alps, who survived Cannae, who survived 14 years undefeated in Italy, are enclosed exactly the way Rome's 86,000 were enclosed at Cannae. The line breaks. Hannibal, watching from what remains of his command position, understands immediately what has just happened, because nobody in the world understands it better than he does. He built this exact trap once. He knows precisely how it ends. He does not stay to watch it finish. He escapes the field with a small group of horsemen, one of the very few times in his career. He leaves a battlefield before it's over. By the end of the day, Carthaginian losses are somewhere near 20,000 dead, with thousands more captured. Scipio's losses are a fraction of that. The battle that Hannibal built 3 defensive lines to survive is over in hours, decided in the end by the exact tactic he had perfected himself. A double cavalry envelopment, closing on an army from the rear at the precise moment its center could no longer hold alone. Hannibal returns to Carthage and tells the ruling council something almost no one wants to hear. Make peace. Not because the city has no more men, but because he, of all people, understands there is no version of this war left to win. Carthage surrenders. The terms are brutal. Its navy dismantled, its overseas territory gone, an indemnity that will burden the city for 50 years. The Second Punic War, which began with Hannibal crossing the Alps as a young general nobody could stop, ends with him standing in a council chamber telling his own people the fight is finished. Scipio returns to Rome and receives a title no Roman has held before him in quite the same way, Africanus, the man who beat Hannibal, and Hannibal, the man who spent 17 years undefeated, who terrified Rome for a generation, who invented a trap so perfect it's still studied today, spends the rest of his life in exile, hunted from court to court by a Rome that never stopped being afraid of him, even after Zama. Even after everything, because Rome had learned in the end that the
way to beat the greatest general who ever lived was to become him first.